Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Expanse Season 3, Episode 6, Immolation. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of the Expanse. I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for the Expanse up to Season 3, Episode 6. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, I will not spoil events from the novels that have yet to occur in the show, but I will have a spoiler section at the end of the video for those who have read the novels, but I will give a proper spoiler warning before doing so. So it's probably evident even to those who haven't read the novels that this episode covers the end of Book 2, so it's almost like a finale, but has traditional with the Expanse. It airs in the middle of the season instead. So this was a pretty epic episode, and a lot of great things happened in it that I really loved, and it was really exciting, really thrilling episode. But even though I'm loath to say anything negative about the show, especially now when its fate hangs in the balance and we should all be positive as possible to make sure this show goes on, and I do love this show. It is still my favorite show currently airing, period. But if I'm being completely honest, and I always strive to be as honest as possible on my channel, I was a tad bit disappointed in this episode, just a tad, as I was expecting a little bit more than we got. Now, this may be me coming off as a snooty book reader, which I try not to do, and I managed to avoid this particular phrase up until now, but I'm going to have to come out and say it. I thought this was done better in the books. Sorry, I just had to say it. The main issue I had is that in this episode, Avasarala had nothing to do, really. In fact, she seemed pretty underused all season, particularly when compared to the books, whereas in the novels, during these sequences, she had a lot to do, and they focused a lot more on the political intrigue aspect of the battle, and Earth and Mars having to unite, and the public war that she fought, like, over the media in order to win over the public. And that added, I was really missing that dynamic in this episode, to be honest. And I've always been a huge Avasarala fan, so to see her get the shaft a bit was a bit disappointing to me. Now, granted, they may deal with this in the next several episodes, but in the novel she had a lot to do during this battle, and I think that added an extra element of intenseness that was missing here, but that's just me. Also, I thought the sequence on the Agatha King was a bit underwhelming when compared to the novels, as it was much more involved and a lot more scary and intense. Now, I understand budget reasons, they have to cut things back a bit, but to me, this was one of the most iconic sequences in the novel, so if there's one thing you need to splurge your budget on, it should be these scenes. And plus, there are ways to do it that would have been really more intense, but still not use much budget. So, these things kind of disappointed me, but that being said, the storylines with Bobby Draper and Amos and Prax went down pretty much exactly as they did in the novels, and they worked really well to see them on screen. And as I said, I still thought this episode was great. It was intense. It just failed to live up to my ridiculously high, unrealistic expectations, but that's just me. Anyway, I'll put my snooty book reader hat away now, from now on, and focus on the show. Anyway, let's actually start with Ehrenreich and Anna back on Earth. Now, this sequence I thought fell a tad bit flat as well, and this actually has nothing to do with the books because this sequence is almost completely off book, but just compared to the setup that the show itself did, where they had been building to this big confrontation between Pastor Anna and Ehrenreich for a while now, and she beat him rather easily, and it went down pretty much exactly as one might expect, and it took the evidence to Gillis and he arrested Ehrenreich. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I was somehow expecting it to be a bit more complex than that, because Ehrenreich's been a really tough, really difficult character, and to see him just go down so easily was a bit disappointing. I suppose the surprise in this scene comes in in Gillis's reaction, as after he arrested Aaron Wright, Anna smiles at him like he did the right thing and he's a good man again, but then he just said, "Oh, thank you for giving someone else giving me someone else to pin the responsibility of this war on, so my reputation will remain untarnished." What a swarmy, slimy piece of shit politician. And I like it. I further wonder how this will affect Anna going forward, if she will completely cut ties with Gillis after this. One would think, but then again, we know she's still going to be in the rest of the season, so we'll see how they keep her in. Also, it was really despicable when Anna first came to see him and he greeted her by saying, "Oh, if you're here to apologize, I really don't give a shit." Seriously? She apologized to him? Really? Fuck that guy. In my review of episode 4, I said that I thought that he was hurt by Anna's reaction and it caused him regret. And he actually felt bad about making her upset. But it seems that I overestimated him and that he's a much bigger piece of shit than I gave him credit for. Something made even more clear by his reaction after Aaron Wright's arrest. And speaking of Aaron Wright, the way he went down was kind of cool, as he didn't even try to weasel his way out, as instead he just attacked Gillis. And his attacks are actually pretty spot on. He said that Gillis only cared about what the history books thought of him, which he actually proved correct. And when Aaron Wright said that the planet deserved better than him, I can't really say that I disagree with him. He also talked about how Gillis just listens to whoever talked to him last, and if he talked to a janitor last, he'd be talking about the virtues of a fucking mop. Great line, I loved. And that too was also accurate. But that being said, if this indeed is how Aaron Wright goes down, I was expecting something a lot more for such a powerful character who has been such a menace on the show for such a long time. But perhaps this isn't the last we've seen of Aaron Wright. We'll just have to see. As for what Aaron Wright said about how he only cared about Earth and he really believed that he was doing what was best for Earth, I'm not so sure I believe him. I believe that he believes that, or rather, he convinced himself that in order to make himself seem righteous. But in actuality, he's just as self-serving and slimy as Gillis is, if not more so. He proved that in Season 2, where he could have done the right thing. He could have given up Jules Pierre Mal and the protomolecule, and Earth would have been way better off. And the real reason why he didn't had nothing to do with what he thought was good for Earth. It had to do with his own career. It had to do with the fact that his career was over and he was going down. And that's the real reason why he betrayed Avasarala and went off on this path. So despite all of his bullshit excuses about doing what's best for Earth, when it comes down to it, he's just really doing this for his own ambition and lust for power, nothing more. So he got exactly what he deserved. So now let me get to Io and the infiltration of the station. Now, it's interesting that after the hybrids were launched, Holden decided to go ahead with his mission. I was really expecting Holden to turn back and go to the Versanate. Mainly, this is because what happens in the novels, though. Because in the novels, he's the one who boarded the Avatha King and not Naomi and Alex. So I was expecting him to turn around so he could do that. But apparently the show had different ideas than the books. And so Holden went ahead inside the complex. And really, I think this gives him a lot less to do in this episode than I was expecting. So we see Jules Pierre Mal again make a reasonable decision to surrender to the Martians. However, once again, Dr. Strickland talks him into doing the wrong thing. Strickland is really a bad influence on Mal, as he talks him into trying to run and to use the children in order to get away. And Mal once again shows the kind of scumbag that he can be when pushed in the right direction, or the wrong direction, however you look at it. As a few seconds after saying that they should surrender so no one else dies, he orders all his men to fight to the death when he knows that they'll die, but doing so will allow him and Strickland time to get away. What an asshole. And on top of that, Strickland has another idea to stall them by unleashing the proto-molecule hybrid that was once Katoa, but he isn't anymore. He's all hybrid. And that was a really, really cool shot where we see the proto-molecule on Venus disassembling the ship, but it zooms out as we see this is all in the hybrid's eye, which is a very cool visual way to show that the hybrid is linked to the proto-molecule on Venus, and also it's setting, it's up to something. Plus, that shot just looks really damn cool. So, awesome cinematography, great shot. Anyway, I love the scene where Holden, Amos, Bobby, and Prax are in an elevator, and they start off by talking about Bobby's suit, but it leads them to talk about how plants grow, and Holden talks about how he tried to grow a watermelon in a box, but it came out square. This was great because of Naomi's reaction, where she thinks that they're going delirious from lack of oxygen or something, but Avasarala explains that they're whistling in the dark, which is a cool callback to when she was whistling when going through the high G's in order to distract herself. I love that, and I think that was really a nice moment. So when they get out, they're attacked by Mal's men. Prax is a bit untrained and tries shooting at them before taking cover, which Amos scolds him for. Again, we see that Prax is untrained and just going in full hardy, and that Amos is there to look out for him. And I like how the others freak out and take cover, but Draper just stands in the open and calmly kills all 4 men. It's a bit badass, but then again, when we learn that they were just fodder Mal used to try to get away, it does make you feel a bit sorry for them. At any rate, they continue onward, and Draper identifies where the children are, but she also detects a hybrid, and Holden's first instinct is for them to run back to the Rossi, but Draper insists that they're too close, so she yells at them to get the children as she'll draw the hybrid away. Now, Holden and the others may not have been on board with her plan, but it doesn't matter because she ran away before they could stop her. So they rightfully did what she asked and took advantage of her distraction. Now, one could speculate on Draper's motivations here, whether she was doing it because it was the best way to save the children, or was she suicidal, or did she have a need to face the proto-molecule monster again, or did she have a desire for revenge and she wanted to face it down, or was it simply because she was a Marine and she knew that this was the best way that she could be helpful to the mission that she was trained to do? I think it's kind of a combination of all those things, but for whatever reason, she went charging in, guns blazing. And Avasarala did try to talk her out of it by saying taking on the proto-molecule monster won't bring her team back. And I absolutely love Draper's response, where she just says, "Ma'am, for once in your life, please just shut the fuck up." That was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it was also intense seeing Draper defenseless as her suit is no longer operational, making her a prisoner of that suit as a hybrid just crawls all over her and she's just waiting for it to kill her, which it doesn't do right away as it seems distracted, and I think in part because it doesn't see her as an immediate threat, but mainly because it's distracted by what's going on Venus, and I think that's what it's looking towards when it's looking out in space. Either way, she takes advantage of this and finally kills it, which should have been very satisfying for her, but honestly at this stage I think she was just happy to be alive. So anyway, we get a really cool and really intense chase scene where Draper runs from the hybrid, drawing it away and shooting it at times to try to kill it. And this scene visually was amazing. It's typical of the great cinematography and special effects that helps make this show so amazing. I love how in the scene you got Draper's perspective from her suit, which included a rear view of the proto-molecule monster behind her. I love that. It visually looked awesome and story-wise helped orientate where each character was. Also, seeing Bobby use her suit thrusters to basically fly while the hybrid could simply take huge jumps made for super intense, well paced out chase scene. absolutely intense. I can't praise this enough. And it was shocking when the hybrid ambushed her and body slammed her down to the ground, which was one fucking steep drop. Very super intense. At any rate, Bobby's chase did indeed allow Holden and the others to catch up to Strickland and the children before they could get away. While Amos and Prax went after Strickland and the children, Holden was looking for the command codes to stop the hybrids that were launched, only to learn that Mal had surrendered control to the Agatha King, so Holden went after Mal himself. His bodyguard foolishly tried to shoot at Holden, which of course only got him killed. Mal wasn't as stupid and also was unarmed, and either way is a bit of a coward, so simply held up his hands and surrendered. He recognized Holden and thought, well, of course it's you, as from his perspective, Holden keeps showing up at all the bad times and keeps fucking up all of his plans. I do like how he assumed Holden was after him and tracked him there, but he explains that it's just a coincidence. He must see Holden as his greatest adversary, a nuisance, or both. Either way, he obviously has no respect for him. Now, from Holden's perspective, Mal is responsible for all the shit and horror that he had experienced since the Canterbury's destruction, and including its destruction, plus the horror he witnessed on Eros, Earth nearly being destroyed by Eros, and the devastation on Ganymede, including the danger unleashed by the hybrids. So it must have been very tempting for Holden to do what to Mal, the same thing that Amos will soon do to Strickland. But Holden isn't Amos, and he already come back from the abyss, so he takes Mal prisoner instead. But once Holden confirms that Mal can no longer help in the crisis, he does tell him to shut the fuck up, which was nice. So Holden locked down the departure bays to slow Strickland's escape, and it worked, as Strickland could hear the others coming and knew that he was fucked, so told the children to stay in the airlock. His assistant assumed it was so they could use the children as a bargaining chip, and Strickland was like, yeah, sure, that's it. And as soon as she turned her back on him, he shoots her, kills her, and blames it all on her and acts like he's the hero that saved the children. Now, if it was never specified in either book or show whether or not Strickland was made into a sociopath the same way Kotazar was by having a piece of his brain removed. But either way, it's extremely clear that he is a sociopath. I mean, that move was just cold. But it also wasn't the right move because he assumed the people coming were just random Martian soldiers who knew nothing about him. Unfortunately for him, it was Prax and Amos who knew exactly who Strickland was, as they had looked him up before they got there, and that they knew he had ties to Protogen, and they had deduced that he was directly responsible for creating the protomolecule hybrids. So his act of pretending to be one of the good guys was doomed to failure, because Prax and Amos already had his number. When Prax kept trying to get the real story from May, Strickland kept interrupting to try to spin it in his way, even when Prax was telling him to shut up. But then Amos said, no, seriously, shut up. I think then Strickland knew to shut his goddamn mouth. So it was a very touching scene to finally see Prax reunited with May after all this time. I do believe it brought a tear to my eye. It was very well earned. However, you could see the look in Prax's eyes when he remembered the anger that he had at Strickland for stealing his daughter away and nearly turning her into a protomolecule monster, and all the misery that it put him through. And so he knew that Strickland had to die. And it was also very touching how Prax introduced her to Amos, and Amos was just like, hi, That was a bit nice to see also. Shows how much Amos actually cared for children, and I'm sure this has to do with his own personal experiences as a child. But Prax takes Strickland into the airlock, and Strickland pleads for his life, and Prax himself cries as he struggles with killing a man in cold blood. But thankfully, Amos shows up and gives him a warm hand to put the gun down as he gently tells him, "You're not that guy." Now, before I noted how Prax was becoming cold and unfeeling as he believed his daughter was dead, and I speculated on if he did find his daughter alive and well, whether or not he ever could go back to the man he was before, or if he lost that forever. And this scene, I think, indeed is confirmation that he can go back and will go back to the loving father that he was before, as he didn't have it in him to kill a man in cold blood, no matter how much that man deserved it. And it showed how close Amos and him had become, that Amos was there to talk him out of it. And of course, when Prax left, Strickland was thanking Amos, but I kept waiting for Amos to say, "I am that guy." And sure enough, he did, and as soon as he did, I was cheering. Even though it is kind of a dark scene, Strickland just really deserves it. And I do believe part of the reason Prax didn't do it is because he knew that Amos would do it for him. So in that way, he isn't completely innocent, but at least he didn't have to be the one that pulled the trigger, so it won't haunt him in that way. So let me get to the Versanate storyline, which begins with Alex trying to destroy the hybrid modules as they are launched. He manages to take down a few, but there's just too many and a lot of them get away. The Earth and Mars forces try to destroy some as well, but still too many get away. And even though the modules go into stealth mode as soon as they leave our orbit, Avasarala knows exactly where they're headed, Mars, and that makes total sense, as Wynn's last move after he knew he was fucked was not to attack the Martian fleet. He was thinking bigger than that. It was to wipe out Mars entirely. But unfortunately, when the UNN ships were trying to destroy the pods, they end up knocking one of the pods into the Agatha King, which basically fucks them all. So Avasarala, wanting to know what's going on up there, asked Naomi to show her what's going on so they can see the Agatha King is in fact infected with the protomolecule. We actually see what's going on up there with Kotiar, who's still locked up in sickbay, getting a visit from an ensign who's running for her life from a man who is clearly infected by the protomolecule. So Kotiar helps him take him down, but has to explain to the poor ensign, whose name is Larson, what the protomolecule is and that she's infected, so she's basically dead. And when he tells her this, she fires at him, so he thinks he's going to die, but instead she shoots off his restraints. He asks for her help, but she seems resigned to just sit there and die, feeling the situation is hopeless. But he gets a suit on and goes out to investigate to find the protomolecule everywhere, so he realizes himself that the situation is indeed hopeless. So after Holden tells Naomi and Alex the launch codes are no longer with Jules Pierre Mal on Io and that they are on the Agatha King, Alex, who is desperate to save Mars, as for one thing his family is still on Mars, wants to go to the Agatha King himself to stop it, even though it's infected with the protomolecule. But Naomi doesn't want him to go alone, so she goes with him, leaving Avasarala in charge of the Versanate. What sense it makes to leave her alone on the Versanate, I can't say. I mean, she has no idea how to do anything on a spaceship. She's a freaking politician, but whatever. At least someone's there. Anyway, Alex and Naomi take the Razorback to the Agatha King and find a way to go directly to the bridge. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the sequence was severely scaled back when compared to the novels, as there, Holden had to fight his way past dozens of protomolecule monsters or infected people with only Ensign Larson's help. And it was a huge journey through a terrifying, haunted spaceship, and when we finally got to the CIC, it felt like a huge accomplishment. Here, it felt like kind of a cheat, how Naomi and Alex just skipped directly to the CIC, but whatever. Anyway, there Naomi finds that she can stop the hybrid modules. She can't stop them, but she can only change their course. But even that, she can only do one at a time, and it takes a lot of time to do so. And they also discover Wynn, who's still alive and tries to shoot at them, but he's out of ammo. So instead, he's just a nuisance as he taunts them about how Martians are all just insects and they need to be exterminated. Now, this does make a lot of sense for his character motivation, that he simply sees Mars as less than human and has an inherent hatred of Martians and wants to see them wiped out. We can infer from the traumatic experience that he had, in which he barely survived and had to watch a lot of good men die during an attack by the MCRN, that his hatred is born out of that traumatic experience. It doesn't at all excuse his behavior, but it explains his motivation, making him an even more fleshed out and believable character. And simply has gone mad as he just taunts Alex and Naomi and is resigned to die, knowing that he'll wipe out Mars, which he sees as a huge accomplishment. Now, this I did find a huge improvement from the novels where he simply just begged for his life. This seems more in line with his character as portrayed in the show. However, where Naomi is trying to shut down the hybrid modules one by one, which takes a lot of time, Kotier goes to engineering and sabotages the engines and rigs it to blow in a nuclear explosion, thus eliminating the danger of contamination. So Kotier sends out a general message to all ships in the area, warning what he's about to do, and Avasarala sees this. She tries to tell Naomi to link her to him so she can talk him out of this stupidity, but she can't because Kotier specifically rigged it so people can't talk back to him. Now, this could be him not wanting anyone to try to talk him out of it, but I think it's more specifically him not wanting Avasarala to talk to him, because what he says in his last moments of life was obviously meant for her. So I believe he knows, or at least believe, that she's in the area and can hear him. And his final words were really touching, as he says that he was sure he'd have something witty or profound to say at this time, but nothing is coming to him. Shows how human he is, and that basically he feels he's atoning for having let Avasarala's son die. And it was very touching seeing Avasarala notably moved by his death. That being said, I do kind of wish that Avasarala did get to speak to him before he died. I think that could have been even more powerful, but oh well. And of course, I'm very sad that this character died. He was never a factor in the book, so his fate was always unknown to me, but I was hoping that he would make it and be on the show for much longer because I really like this character. But if he had to go, this was a great way for him to die. And I loved Wynn's reaction to the fact that the Agatha King was about to be destroyed, as he was just laughing like a madman and seemed to, in fact, to take joy out of his impending death. That was a really nice, creepy touch to the scene, because that means that Naomi won't have the time to stop the hybrid modules. I love that. And how he said, "Well, you're welcome to stay with me, Martian," just shows how mad with hate that he's become. But Naomi convinces Alex to leave before the Agatha King is destroyed, and Alex is desperate to stop the hybrids from wiping out Mars, but Naomi comes up with another plan, and to give the transponder codes, which she managed to activate before they left, to Fred Johnson so that he can use the UN missiles that he stole in order to destroy all of the modules before they get to Mars. But first, she makes sure that everyone in the Versanate crew is okay and on board with this plan before doing so this time around, because she saw what happened when she does things without them. So then we get a montage of Fred Johnson getting the message, and then the missile going out to destroy the hybrids, Prax having a loving reunion with May, Alex helping Bobby heal in the sickbay, Holden bringing Mal to Avasarala as a prisoner, and Naomi and Holden in bed. Now, to be honest, I felt this montage was a bit of a rushed way to conclude the episode that, to be honest, felt a bit anticlimactic to me. But as a montage itself, it was a good montage, but it did feel like a rushed way to conclude this storyline. At any rate, a couple things I want to talk about here. First is Holden bringing Mal to Eva Umbrella. When he sees her, he knows that he's fucked, and he knows how much power that she wields, and of course the fact that he just tried to have her killed isn't going to exactly make her go easy on him. But the way Holden presented him to her and made him like get on his knees before her, actually felt a bit silly to me, like he was trying to be like in medieval times or something, like kneel before me, but whatever. And the other thing that's really worth talking about is Holden and Naomi. We see them, they're fully made up and they're shacking up again. But through their conversations, they make it appear as if they still agree that the best thing is for Naomi to leave. And it appears that she will go and leave the Versanate to join the OPA. Which I'm not too happy about, but I can kind of see why they're doing this, knowing where the story is going for him here. And of course the montage ends with the revelation of this thing that the protomolecule built on Venus, whatever the hell it is, lifting off and launching into space. It looks like a giant tick to me, but that's just my eyes. I heard many other comparisons of what this might look like. To me, it looks like a tick. And I love Amos's response to it. He's the only person we see respond to it, and it was hilarious. I just cracked up every time, as Amos is with like children, the children that he rescued, and he's feeding them breakfast and totally forgets or doesn't care that he's around children and just says, "What the fuck is that?" I love that. That Amos just doesn't care about swearing around children, but it also shows that this thing is so shocking, so frightening, that no one would care about anything, as it's the single biggest mystery the human race has ever encountered, and that, of course, is frightening as hell. And the music in this scene was absolutely amazing. Again, felt like it was a tad bit rushed, but still a very effectively creepy scene. So my rating for Immolation out of 10 is a 9. Excellent. I damn near gave this episode a 10 despite my slight disappointment and things that didn't turn out as well as I thought it would be, because expectations aside, this was still an amazing episode with a lot of great moments, amazing cinematography, great special effects, really powerful and effective music, and some really touching character moments. And some moments that had me in tears and some moments that had me in laughter. So really effective. So a really powerful episode that I loved, but a few minor flaws just held it back ever so slightly from being a 10 for me, but not by very much. So that's it for my spoiler-free section of my review of Immolation. Be sure to check out my live discussion with Apkin Tomko and Don Willie on this episode Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US, where we break down this episode. I'll put a link to that event in the description below. Also, be sure to check out my channel as I continue to break down every episode of The Expanse, and as I cover many other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Babylon 5, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching. However, for those of you who have read the novels, you can follow me to my spoiler section, which begins now. So, as I mentioned, I was quite surprised that they switched up to having Naomi and Alex go on the Agatha King rather than Holden. This was in part done to focus more on Naomi and Alex and not give Holden all the spotlight, but I think this was also done so that Holden would specifically be the one who arrested Jules Pierre Mal, or detained him, or whatever you call it. In fact, I did half expect him to kill Mal, but it seems just like in the novels, he'll survive to face a prison sentence. I believe this was done so that Calista Mal will have clear reason to hate James Holden and want revenge on him, which I'm still convinced the show will do this storyline, since it was such a major part of the book 3, and because we know that her character is confirmed for season 3. So Naomi going back to join the Belters, which I believe she is, judging by the promo for next week's episode. So that does very much seem to be the case. And that is quite a significant deviation from the books, but I think this is done so that she can take over Bull's storyline from book 3. Now, I had guessed for some time now that Bull wouldn't appear in the show and that his storyline would be given to someone else, but I had assumed that someone else would be Drummer. But it makes a lot of sense for it to be Naomi, as she's a main character that we're already familiar with, so it makes sense that this would be a character we would focus on more. In fact, in the novels, Naomi, Alex, and Amos were mainly just supporting cast that didn't actually get much play. And we're just supporting Holden, that is, until book 5. But in the show, they've always tried to focus more on these characters than being main cast members. So it makes sense that we would have Naomi be the through character on the Behemoth storyline. Also, this is in keeping with my theory that Naomi will not go with Holden and the others to Illis when they do the book 4 storyline, and that she'll stay behind and do her book 5 storyline so that they can do these storylines simultaneously in season 4, which, by the way, is most definitely going to happen. There will be a season 4, do not even think otherwise. Anywho, Drummer will likely take on the role of Michio Powell, and Naomi, for the most part, will take on Bull's role, and Captain Ashford will be played by Captain Ashford, whom we know will be played by veteran actor David Strathairn. Also, we see from the previews that Yagu will return as well, so I'm sure he'll be a factor in the storyline too. But they're roughly take on these character storylines, as I'm sure the Ultimate storyline is going to be severely altered to barely resemble the book storyline, but it will probably take on that bare bones of it. But I think we'll get the gist of it, where Naomi will be forced to lead a mutiny against Ashford, who will become power hungry. So now, how Avasarala and Bobby will remain in the show, I'm not sure, as neither were in book 3, but I'm certain that they will still be around. Prex, I think, is done and will be written off the show, as his storyline is now complete with him being reunited with May, but I'm sure they'll find something for Bobby and Avasarala to do, whether that involves them going to the slow zone with everyone else and to be involved with everything that's going on there, or if they'll invent new storylines for them to do elsewhere in the solar system. I'm not sure. Anna, I'm sure, will definitely go to the slow zone like she did in the novels, but her storyline may take a very different shape again than it did in the novels, so we'll just have to see. So we also get from some promo photos for next week's episode that will be introduced to Monica Stewart in the next episode, so I think rather than Mars suing them to take the Versanate back, it will be more about Avasarala trying to come up with a deal for Holden to keep his ship after all the help that he's given her, and will successfully take him off of the shit list for the UN. However, Mars will be another matter, since they still consider the Versanate their property. So I think it will be part of a plea deal that Monica Stewart will have to come on board and document the Versanate like in the novels. However, unlike the novels, this won't be Calista Mal's idea, but just something that she takes advantage of. Speaking of Calista Mal, I'm still convinced there's going to be a time jump in the next episode. Perhaps not as big as in the novels and more subtle, but I think there needs to be one for Calista for her story to work, because she needs time to set up her plan in motion, including getting those nifty implants, which I hope to hell that they keep that aspect of it in the show. Also, the promo photos show Bobby Draper back in MCRN uniform, which is another big departure from the novels, but also something that requires a time jump. So even if it's not a very big one or not very noticeable, I think there needs to be one. but we'll see. Anyway, that's all I have for spoilers this week. We'll see you guys next week. Take care.